The first buds of the new season are already growing and the first leaves are beginning to show. But before we get to this stage of the annual cycle, every vine grower has to decide whether or not to dig up his old, less productive vines and replace them with more vigorous young vines. This is a process called arrachage. Here's a short video to show you something else about this process that you may not know. Many years ago, in the 1800s and earlier, vines just grew more or less as they wanted. This is a picture taken in the village next door to Velzy of one of the very few remaining plots still grown in this way. Young vines grew from shoots underground, so you didn't know where the next vine would pop up until it appeared. When it did, you simply put a stake in the ground, wherever that was, so that the new vine could climb up it. Vines grown like this were known as vignes en foule, or vines in a crowd. There were no nice, neat rows, and consequently the vineyard was hard to work. These days things are very different. When the vigneron is planting vines, there are some very strict rules to follow. The vines have to be a certain distance apart from each other, between 0.9 and 1.5 meters. The rows must be no more than 1.5 meters apart from one another. And finally, the sum of the space between the rows and between the vines must be no more than 2.5 meters. Here's a plot in Velzy, not one belonging to La Maison Penet, but very close to our plots, which has been cleared and is being prepared for new planting. And as you can see, row upon row of stakes have been put out in marvellous symmetry. Just look down those rows and you'll see that they're absolutely dead straight. It's an impressive pattern and quite a sight to behold. You have to adhere to these regulations whether or not you are the smallest or the largest producer, and this is another illustration of the highly regulated nature of almost everything to do with champagne making. You can tell that this is probably a plot that belongs to a large house, because it's a fairly large plot, and a small vigneron probably wouldn't own a plot this big. Even if he or she did, a plot this size would represent such a large proportion of their total production that they couldn't afford to dig it up and replant in one go, because it would put too much of the annual production out of action for 2 or 3 years while the young vines grew. So that's a quick look into some of the rules and regulations about champagne making that you may not have considered. Every aspect is highly regulated to maintain the highest possible quality.